Great seeing you here again. My name is Luc de Kuster, founder of the Kuster Academy, and in this video I will talk about the principles of schedule management. Schedule management is one of the knowledge areas that's part of the PMBOK, the book published by the PMI and which is reference for the different exams that PMI is organizing. But before we continue, don't forget to click on the subscribe button, click on the bell button, and every time there is a new video, YouTube will inform you about it. So let's have a look. What is schedule management about? Now, typically schedule management is about scheduling activities, but it's not only about scheduling the activities as such or creating their precedence diagrams. We also have to estimate the duration of the activities. We will calculate the start and finish times. And finally, we will create a Gantt chart, and all that is done during the planning step of the project management process. We may have to adjust the start and finish time based on availability of resources or other elements. Basically, we will create at the end of this a Gantt chart which will show us the schedule baseline. Now, once we start with the project, our project plan has been approved, and we will continue with project execution, and in parallel with that we have monitoring and control. Monitoring and controlling is are the processes related to verifying that all the work is done as we planned on time, and we have to evaluate how the project is going. The elements that we get during monitoring and controlling will help us to estimate when the project will be finishing. Now, during the execution, we are creating the deliverables, and we will also record one of the elements, the actual start and finish times of these activities. Also, one part of earned value management is integrated in schedule management. When we look at the schedule, we have to measure, or we have to understand the planned value, which is the baseline, the S-curve, which gives us the overview of the cost over time, cumulative cost over time, and we will evaluate how much deliverables have been created, or this means how much value has been created, and that's what we call earned value. So we will compare the earned value with the planned value and see how our schedule is going. Now, when we look at schedule management, we have different steps that we have to follow. The first step is to further decompose the project. So what we have, in fact, at the end of the scope processes, we found the WBS. And the WBS finishes where we have work packages. Work packages are independent elements that can be done by one group, and they are independent from other activities, other work that has to be completed. Now, in many cases, work packages will be too complex for completing or creating a complete planning, and in larger projects, we can decompose them further to find what we call the activities. Now, in some smaller projects, we will see that the work packages basically will be the same as the activities, and we don't have to decompose further. But typically, when we have a larger project, in that case, we will have to decompose the work packages into smaller elements, and we have to get to the granularity where we have activities that take typically 1 to 2 weeks. Once we know the activities, the detail of the activities, we can estimate effort and duration. Once we know what work has to be done, when we know the work packages, but also when we know the activities, we can identify the skills that are necessary to complete the work and what resources have to be added. We also will find information related to cost, but cost will not be considered in this knowledge area. It will be considered later when we are looking at the cost related processes. Now, based on the work to be completed, the skills needed, let's say resources, both human and material, we can determine the effort and the duration of the individual activities. We can estimate them using different techniques, but we are going to specifically look into what we called PERT and 3-point estimation. PERT estimation, program evaluation and review technique. It's a technique that comes from the activity on the arrow networking processes, and the 3-point estimation is a simplified approach to this. Both will be discussed later, and they provide an estimate duration and a standard deviation. It means they include what we call uncertainty into the estimation of durations. Step 3, here we're going to look at the dependencies, because when we finish the WBS, we have what we call a logical overview of all the activities. They are not linked time-wise. There is a different type of logic used here. Now, when we look at those activities, we have to identify the dependencies between these activities. And we have to determine which activities must be completed before follow-up activities can start. And that's an important thing to do, because we have to understand what has to be done first, what next, and so on. All these things are part of this step. Once we know the dependencies, we can create the precedence diagram. So step 4, we will be creating the precedence diagram, and we know that this is a very interesting and important tool in project management, and different techniques have been developed. Now, the main methods can be divided in 2 categories, what we call activity on arrow and activity on node methods. AOA, or activity on the arrow methods, include what we call the arrow diagramming method and the program evaluation and review technique, or ADM and PERT, and the activity on the node only includes the precedence diagramming method. We will look at this later, and I will give some examples of the different techniques and compare them so you have an idea what the difference between these different methods are. Now, when we look at these elements, a complete schedule is only created for predictive projects. When we are looking at adaptive approaches to project management, we will do this in a different way. Nevertheless, it's always very important to understand what the dependencies are between the different activities. We don't want to start an activity before all its predecessors have been completed. Based on this, when we have the network, when we did all the calculations, start and finish time, we can create what we call the project schedule or the Gantt chart. Now, whatever method we use, the ADM, the PERT, or the PDM, the Gantt chart will always give you the same information, or should give you the same information. The Gantt chart will later be used for project execution and follow-up. Now, the same thing here. When we have an adaptive approach, we will not use the classical Gantt chart. We will use different methods, more flexible methods, to show planning and progress. Evaluating progress is also very important. Now we come into the execution and monitoring control process steps. Now, we want to know what's going wrong, what's going well. We want to know what's happening with the planning that we, proposed, the planning that we created. And we want to see also what will happen, what can we do to remediate eventual issues. Now, typically we use a Gantt chart, but we can also use the earned value management approach, where we can compare the planned progress, the planned value, and the actual progress, or the earned value, or the value of the deliverables that we created. Now, in agile environments, typically People will use a burn down or a burn up chart as typical, for example, for Scrum, and for other techniques, other elements can be used. There is also a way to use earned value management parameters when you're working in an agile environment. So that was it for this video. I'm looking forward to seeing you in our next videos, but before we stop, don't forget to click on the subscribe button, click on the bell button, and every time we have a new video, YouTube will inform you about it. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.